Hello and welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast, the show that helps ambitious professionals reach their peak performance through cutting-edge fitness insights from two of the world's best fitness consultants that I know of. My co-hosts, Andrew Menashian and Mig Tok.
Guys, my name's Andrew Menashian. I was the 2015 men's Australasian IFBB champion. I've competed in powerlifting for over 5 years, with my biggest achievement being unofficially breaking the Australian raw deadlift record. And I've been a coach for over 10 years. I was the education manager at Fitness Playground, and I was the head coach at the Clean Health Fitness Institute.
Hey guys, my name is Mig Tok. I've been in the gym personally for about 22 years. I'd say that's where mainly my expertise came from. I like to trial and error a few things. I like to practice what I preach. So if I'm going to give out some programs or nutrition or what different protocols, I'd be sure to do it myself, experiment at first and give it out to my clients. I've been in the industry now for 13 plus years, spent say hundreds and thousands of dollars on my education and upskill. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, Mick. And I'm Marcus. I'm a corporate senior manager, and I've worked with in the executive health and wellness space for almost 10 years. But let's jump into it. So in today's episode, we're going to discuss everything and all things coffee and caffeine. We'll focus on the effects of coffee on performance, particularly in the workplace. Be sure to listen all the way through the end to get the most from this miracle bean and to learn some things that you'd be surprised by when it comes to coffee. And so let's jump right into it. So normally when you think of performance enhancing substances, you don't normally think caffeine because it's such an everyday part of our lives. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere, right? But if you stop drinking coffee, cold turkey, you definitely notice the next day that there was a major impact on your cognitive and physical performance. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like a drug, right? I mean, caffeine is a form of a drug, right? So, I mean, you come off a drug, you're going to have withdrawals. Those withdrawals go from fucking headaches, dizziness, low mood, low energy, lethargic, which lasts for about a couple of days. But I mean, you just got to have the brain power and and that motivation just to take it, just to overcome those first few days. So yeah, just like you're gonna get withdrawals having coffee. So,
but why is that? Why? What is caffeine doing to the brain and to the body, where it allows you to enhance your performance, and then not perform so well when you go off it?
So, like when you look at like the chemical way that it works, it's like it acts similar to adenosine, and adenosine sort of acts to suppress our central nervous system, so like sort of to make us tired. And the problem is when we ingest coffee, caffeine, blah, 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 it takes up the same receptors as adenosine takes up. So adenosine would normally go into those receptors and make you tired. But if you have caffeine, it takes up the receptors and it blocks adenosine from making you tired. So that's basically how you get the performance enhancing thing. So it keeps you alert, keeps you awake, you can concentrate more and all of that as well. So that's one of the ways it works. And when you stop taking it, obviously the adenosine gets back to work. And in that process as well, there'll be a lot of, downregulation, desensitization, tolerance built as well. So yeah, when you stop taking it, that's where you get the bad effects. Also, it would have effects on your dopamine system, and your dopamine system can become desensitized when you abuse it. So you downregulate your dopamine receptors. So if you keep doing it for too long, all of a sudden, basically your dopamine receptors are desensitized. Now, if you take away the thing that stimulates the dopamine receptors, you've got less dopamine in the system. And this is kind of where you get that withdrawal feeling from. So basically every single addiction out there, doesn't matter what it is, if it's, heroin, alcohol, cocaine, whatever it is, all addictions work off the dopamine system. So, even though we may not look at coffee like it's an extremely bad thing, and it's definitely not as bad as heroin, that's for sure. But in terms of the withdrawal symptoms and all of that, it's kind of going to work in the same way. Obviously, it's not, and when I say that, I mean, it's going down the same path, but it might not be anywhere near to the same intensity as it would be to, get off cocaine addiction or something like that. So yeah, that's like the gist of how it's sort of working.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, here in 2022, most people have heard of the term dopamine and kind of have an idea that it works on your motivation system. And, you know, when you're on social media, you get little hits of dopamine, or when you eat a nice hamburger, you get hits of dopamine. But for those that don't know, what is it that dopamine is doing to your brain and to your system?
It's like a reward system. So basically, like, dopamine is your drive for everything. If you don't have dopamine, you're not going to do anything. I remember reading a really interesting study, which really helps people to understand the importance of dopamine. And basically, like, it was a little study they did on rats. And what they did was, don't ask me how the process of actually how they did this was, but they chemically got rid of this rat's dopamine. Again, I don't know how it was done. So they chemically got rid of this rat's dopamine, and they made sure that the rat was hungry at the time. Now, they made sure that the rat knew how to do what they were doing in the test beforehand. And basically what they did was chemically took out this rat's dopamine. And as soon as they did that, the rat just laid on its back, didn't fucking move, didn't do shit. They made sure the rat was hungry before this test. And they put a bit of food on the other side of the little, room that they made for the rat. Rat didn't move. Even though he knew the food was over there, he was hungry, didn't move. Brought the food closer, didn't move. Brought the food right next to the rat, didn't move. Put the food on the rat's chest, didn't move. Put the food on the rat's chin, didn't move. Put the food in the rat's mouth, then it started chewing. You know what I mean? So like, he doesn't even have the drive to pick up that bit of food. Like, that's how important dopamine is. If you don't have dopamine, you're a fucking potato, right? Like, that's how important it is. So there's so many things in the world today that abuse your dopamine system, which is why so many people have so many, for example, anxiety. You can get anxiety when you abuse the dopamine system as well, because the things that should give you a pleasure reward for doing an activity is now become desensitized, and you need to have a hyper stimulus of dopamine just to feel good anymore. That's why, people that abuse social media or porn or whatever, they have, anxiety. They can't function in society normally. So yeah, dopamine is extremely important. And unfortunately, in this day and age, it's abused far too much.
Absolutely. That's why we all got short attention spans, right? I mean, likes on social media, like you said, porn, weed. We're looking for that quick fix. So best way for me personally to get dopamine, if I get a sense of achievement, that's my only sort of my dopamine hit these days. Whereas before, like you said, I used to be all those things, man. I went down that path where, watching porn and, smoking weed and taking drugs, and that really fried my dopamine. And, and like now, like I said, my dopamine hits now when I get a sense of achievement, when I accomplish something. That's my sort of my dopamine hit, so to speak. And as far as caffeine, I mean, I'm an avid caffeine drinker. I mean, I went from about 6 cups a day, messed up my GI tract, messed up my guts, and I got to a point where it was doing the reverse effect. It was doing the opposite effect. So what happened was I decided to do a caffeine detox, where I just went, okay, for the next 7 days, I'm not going to have any caffeine. So I did that 7 days. Like I said, the first few days, I had those bad withdrawals. I had those bad, just lethargic and no drive and just tired. And that went away after about 3 or 4 days. Okay, you know what? I gotta be ruthless. That's it. I made up my mind. I'm going to do this. 4 days went by. I'm starting to feel better. 5 days, yeah. So I did my 7 days. I said to myself, I still need caffeine. So you know what? I'm going to go for another 7 days. And I got to a point where, you know what? I don't need caffeine anymore. So I went about 3 months without caffeine. Was there a difference? The only difference I got was when I had that first sip of black coffee. Wow, what a buzz. So yeah, that's sort of, I got to a point where, okay, you know what? I got way too dependent on it. And like, said to myself, no, okay. I went 1 week, no, I feel I need coffee. 2 weeks, I got to a point where, you know what? I don't need coffee no more. And when I got to the point where I don't need coffee, that's when I sort of went back on the coffee. So yeah,
Similar experience.
just thought of like I had so just to get my build a bit of mental toughness, a bit of mental resilience around caffeine because I was so dependent on it.
So it sounds like you reset your baseline, like your baseline, as Andrew said, dopamine levels. At first you were under withdrawal, so perhaps your dopamine levels were had perhaps fallen off a cliff, but over time you reach your baseline. But once you went back to it and had that first cup of strong black coffee and everything just lit up for you, that's when again you felt the performance effects, the cognitive effects of
Absolutely.
of the drug. What kinds of physical effects did you feel on that first cup after not having it for 3 months?
Physically, of not having.
When after 3 months you had that first cup, was it
just
before a workout?
Yeah, I had after I did that 3 months of no coffee, I went back to saying, and that's it. I only want to have 2 coffees a day, and that was first thing in the morning, and my pre-workout. And after that 3 months, just like you said, I reset my baseline, my tolerance to the caffeine, and like I said, that it's more not physically, not so much, but mentally. Because the gym now for me is more of a mental thing. Just that sort of you need that sort of people take that pre-workout. It's like, okay, I need that buzz. That's the only reason why I drink coffee at the moment, just to get me up in the morning and pre-workout, and with like a few other supplements as well.
So is that why people typically take pre-workouts? Is it mainly for that that cognitive boost and that dopamine boost? Is like you said, Andrew, that rat in the experiment that you mentioned wouldn't move to do anything, to even have a bite of the cheese or whatever was next to it. And so is that basically what's happening here when guys are taking that pre-workout with loads of caffeine in it? Is they're just getting that dopamine hit to get them to get up and go move and lift some weights?
So it depends on the pre-workout. Like there's a lot of different ingredients in a lot of pre-workouts these days. Like it might be a pump formula, there might be a stimulant formula, but most people use pre-workout for a boost of motivation. And as we know, you shouldn't be relying on motivation, you should be relying on discipline. But people want the easy way out these days. They want the shortcut. So my biggest problem with pre-workout, and I'm guilty of it like most, right? I took this stuff when I was young. I took pre-workouts. Back in the day, Mick, I'm sure you know about the old 1MR and the Jack 3D, like that was very strong. So I was taking that sort of stuff.
Jack got banned.
The ingredients,
it got banned, didn't it?
Yeah, it's banned now. So yeah, the ingredients that I was taking back in the day, it was way stronger than the ones they have now. I could be wrong on that, actually. I don't know what they're doing now because I haven't taken it in so long. And what they're doing is, again, they're relying on it for motivation. But what a lot of people don't realize is the tolerance that can be built up. So, it's like, all right, I've got the boost now, and I take it. I rely on it, and I've just sort of fried my system in terms of different things. Like I'm tolerating this too much. I'm tolerating that. My dopamine level has been abused. I'm desensitized with my dopamine, and I don't feel the boost anymore. It's like, oh, what do I do? Oh, instead of 1 scoop, let's take 2 scoops, and then you're just frying yourself even further. So you can be abusing, the cortisol system, your adrenals, and then when you come off it, you feel wrecked, like just like any other drug, right? You just abuse the system, and you get in withdrawal symptoms. And most people don't know what they're doing, so like, oh, I better have more. And it's just like a downward spiral to becoming reliant on it all. So that's one of the reasons why I stopped it. I'm not a fan of having to rely on anything. And yeah, same thing with the coffee as well. That was an interesting thing.
So you stopped drinking coffee, is that right?
For the most part. So I only had a couple cups since I've been here in Greece, working with George. But overall, probably say, what am I now? I'd say over 5 years, I've stopped drinking coffee frequently. Like, I could probably count on my hands how many times I've had coffee in the past 5 years. Like, barely drank it.
Wow.
And yeah, so I'll explain quickly what happened. So like my experience with coffee. So when I was young, up until about 2021, I never really drank coffee. I might have tasted it here and there, but I never went out of my way to drink coffee. I just wasn't a fan. I can't really tell you why. Like I didn't really like the taste. It was like, no, I don't need it. I'm good, whatever. Anyway, and then I did my first bodybuilding competition, which was 13 years ago now. And I wanted a boost. And I'm like, oh, what can I do? What can I take? And, I didn't want to drink coffee, but I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I can just get caffeine pills. So I started taking caffeine pills, to give me that little boost for fat loss. And my education was definitely nowhere near what it is today. So I didn't know anywhere near what I know now. So I was just thinking, yeah, just take it, whatever. I'll get, it'll boost my fat loss, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so these caffeine tablets, mind you, were 200 milligram each. So same sort of things. Like I took the 200 milligram, got the boost, which is, and just side note, 200 milligrams are like roughly 2 cups of coffee, which is decent as it is. Anyway, so I took one, got the boost, eventually built the tolerance, started taking 2, got the boost, built tolerance. And over the course of the prep that I was doing, I ended up getting up to 5 of these tablets a day. So I was taking 1,000 milligram of caffeine a day, which is pretty significant. That's like 10 cups of coffee, right? Anyway, so me not knowing any better, I actually had a holiday planned with some of my mates. And anyway, we went to the holiday, and about 4 to 5 days after the holiday, I was getting splitting migraines, and I never really had headaches in my whole life. So it was very, very unusual. And we just couldn't figure out what it is. Like, and when I say splitting migraines, so we're on holiday, right? We're young, we're trying to figure out what's going on and blah, blah, blah. I was walking through the streets and I couldn't even open my eyes. Like it was so painful. I literally had to walk through the streets holding my friend's shoulder and walking behind him. I'm like this, trying to walk through the streets, like trying to figure out what's going on. I can't even see where I'm going. Anyway, we ended up figuring it all out, putting 2 and 2 together. What have you done different? Blah, blah, blah. And we realized it was the coffee, or the caffeine, I should say. Anyway, so we're like, all right, we've got to try and wean you off it. So we ordered a coffee. I drank the coffee, headaches went straight away. So I was going through major withdrawals because of the extreme amount of caffeine I was on. Anyway, and it was absolutely bizarre. Like I had a coffee and I went from like splitting migraines, thinking I have to go to hospital, to all of a sudden I'm good. So anyway, basically weaned myself off it, having some coffee. And yeah, that's that story there. And then eventually after that, I got into drinking coffee. So then it was like a regular kind of thing. And it was interesting because I was very conscious of it after going through such a sort of messed up experience. I was paying attention to, over time, it took me a while to realize this, but I was paying attention to, I now need a coffee to wake up. It's like I wake up and it's like, oh, I need my coffee. I need my coffee, which I'm sure rings true for pretty much everyone out there. It's like, wake up, it's like, I need my coffee. And I didn't like that. Once I started to realize it, I'm like, I don't like this. Like, I need this thing to get my day started. Like, I feel like a drug addict, right? I didn't like that. And like a little side note on that, a lot of people don't really stop to think about this, but caffeine is arguably the world's biggest addiction, the world's most commonly accepted addiction. It's like a socially accepted addiction, right? And when you think about it, it is an addiction. If you wake up and you're like, I need a coffee, well, you're addicted. Can you just wake up one day and say no? Everyone sort of says, oh yeah, I could, but they never do it, right? Which means no, you couldn't. You're just justifying it to yourself. So yeah, I didn't like that. And then eventually I started to slowly try and come off it. And I realized, I'm like, wow, like it's so difficult to come off. It's like, I need a coffee just to feel at baseline now. So I'm like, I don't like that. Like, I don't like the fact that I need this thing. And the way that I explain it to a lot of my clients, like obviously you got the gut side effects and all these other side effects, but the way I sort of explained it is if this is my normal baseline and then coffee gets me here, once I build up tolerance, now it's like with coffee is my baseline. Without coffee, I'm down here, right? So it's like I wake up here, I need a coffee just to get to normal, and then all of a sudden coffee wears up and I'm back here. But if you never took the coffee in the first place, you're here all day. So that's how I sort of explain it to my clients. But now, like if I have a really bad day, the way that I use coffee is if I have a horrible sleep, I've got something important coming up or whatever, I'll have a coffee, right? But the coffee it actually works. Like same thing as what you're saying, Mick, right? So it's like if your baseline is here and you've got no tolerance, all of a sudden you have a coffee, it feels like you're taking drugs or something. And that's definitely true. So I prefer to have it for its real boost effect and not having to rely on it. So yeah, that's my little my little spiel on coffee and caffeine.
I think I might take that on board, Andrew. Just the fact that, okay, yeah. So can I ask you, when you do take it, does it give you that hit when you do take it every now and again? See, that's the beauty. Mate, that's the beauty of caffeine.
Yeah. So I like the boost. Like the way that I do it now is exactly like I said. So I'm not addicted to it. I'm not relying on it. And when I have it, it's actually a big boost, as opposed to, if you have it every day, it's become your new normal. And it's like you need it just to feel normal. So it's like, well, where's that boost effect anymore? You know what I mean? So yeah, like the other thing is when I do take it, because it's so much stronger now, like my, whatever you want to call it, receptors, blah, 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 everything's a lot stronger. So I actually need to take theanine to calm me down. Otherwise, I get too jittery and too much anxiety from it because it's so strong. And the crazy thing is, I'm just talking one cup of coffee, right? And I'm like, sort of off my head and extreme focus, blah, blah, blah. But it's good. So, the other thing is, like you mentioned this before, Mick, as well, like the gut issues, can irritate the gut lining, like all of that stuff. So I'm very wary of that too. In saying that, there are ways around to minimize the bad effects on the gut. Like this is something we can talk about as well, like the mycotoxins and all of that as well. Most coffee, has mycotoxins on them and all that. But you can get mycotoxin-free coffee as well. But it's something a lot of people aren't aware of. And yeah, look, most people are having coffee, and I'm sure the majority of cafes and everything aren't taking this into account, unless you go into some organic, vegan, Byron Bay sort of coffee shop, and they're getting sprinkling it up with the best coffee beans they can get. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic, because a lot of people are quick to defend it. Like when you talk about addictions, people justify stuff in their head. It's like, you talk about alcohol or gambling. It's like, oh no, I only do it a little bit, or I only do this, or I only do that, or I only do this, or it's okay because I do this. It's like, well, man, that's self-justification, right? And I'm sure a lot of people will be triggered by what I'm saying when they hear that. It's like, oh no, but no, not me. I can give it up at any point. Okay, give it up. Oh no, but I got shit to do. Okay, well, you can't give it up at any point.
When you mentioned pre-workout, it's about 350 grams per scoop in the pre-workout, right? So that's like what 4 cups of coffees.
Yeah.
And come to think about it, these guys are already stressed. Imagine what's going to happen to their adrenals, and this is going to be just a downward spiral just by taking the pre-workout. And depends on when you have it too. Like if you're having it past midday or 2 o'clock, you're not fucking sleeping, man. You're not sleeping.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We haven't even talked about the effects that it can have on, your sleep-wake cycle, your circadian rhythms. I remember hearing about I think it was some guy on the Joe Rogan podcast. They may have been talking about a sleep study or something like that, and how they were saying they were rating people's sleep pre-coffee and post-coffee. And because like so many people have had coffee since they were an adult, right? And it's just a constant thing. They never had a break from it. And what they were saying is like these people that were having coffee were like, oh yeah, my sleep is fine. It's a 10 out of 10 sleep, blah, blah, blah. And they finally got this person to get off coffee, and they go, wow, my sleep is so much better, right? It's like that perceived state of what's normal. It's like, well, if you don't know any different, you're like, yeah, this is my 10 out of 10. All of a sudden it's like, well, you take this thing out and you're like, oh, I didn't realize there was more. Like this is my 10 out of 10. I was actually at a 5 out of 10, right? So yeah, there's definitely effects that it can be having on your sleep recovery performance as well, in a negative way. But again, that's something that can be fixed up by, just having it, have the coffee when you wake up, don't have one past midday. And it's like, you can kind of fix that problem.
Absolutely. There's apparently it stays in your system. Like I've got a shelf life for like 10 hours. So yeah, so I'd say anything like the absolute latest, if you're going to take coffee, I'd say at 2 p.m. will be the absolute latest.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned sleep, keep going.
You're funny you bring that up, because I'm pretty sure it was that same Joe Rogan podcast. They were saying there's a quarter life of caffeine. So I forget what the half-life is off the top of my head, but I think it was 6 to 8 hours for the half-life. But then there's a quarter life of 12 hours. So that's saying 12 hours after you have it. For example, if you have 100 milligram, 12 hours after you have it, there's still 25 milligram in your system, which is like a decent amount. Like if you're trying to sleep right, you still got coffee in your system. And plus, most people aren't just having one, probably having 2 or 3. So then you can call that quarter life 50 milligram or blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah, what people don't realize too is you mentioned that 10 out of 10 sleep, mate, you don't need the coffee. I'd say about
Yeah.
98% of the population isn't sleeping properly. Oh yeah, I'm sleeping properly. No, you're not sleeping properly. But then again, I think that's another top. That's a topic for that's a conversation for another conversation. So
But those pre-workouts, so if a pre-workout has 400 grams, right? And if you're saying the quarter life is 12 hours, that means if you do, I don't know, an afternoon workout during the lunch hour, and you have that pre-workout, so you have 100 grams of caffeine in your blood
Milligrams.
at midnight.
Milligrams. 100
Sorry,
grams, I'll be in
milligrams, of course.
hospital.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, basically, yeah. So if they, so what do we say, 12 hours? So yeah,
Yeah.
if they had it at midday, 400 milligram, yeah, they'll still have 100 milligram in their system, which is equivalent to 1 cup of coffee, which is crazy. In saying that though, like, I don't know about like, how do you say it? Your parents or your grandparents? I know mine at least. Like they have coffee before bed, and I look at them like they're crazy whenever I hear about it. I'm like, what are you having coffee so late for? But they're used to it, and they're like, oh yeah, I can sleep on coffee. But it's like that perceived state of what's normal, and they would just perceive that as, oh, this is normal for me. So well, you probably don't understand how much better your sleep would be if you didn't do that, right? But it's like trying to teach an old dog new tricks. How are you supposed to teach your grandma or your grandpa to do something like that? It's very difficult, especially if they're not wanting to make those improvements, which, pretty common as well.
it's just that they've become so immune to it. It's like nothing to them. That's how much they take.
Yeah.
So I got
Just
to that
curious,
point.
Just curious, Andrew, what was that, like a cultural thing or was that a generational thing?
I don't know, to be honest. I'm not too sure. Like, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just my family. I don't know. I just remember
Okay.
always growing up.
Definitely my
I
family
still,
too, man. Definitely my
oh, there
family
you
too.
go.
Is it
Yeah.
the Lebanese coffee? They get
Nah,
the ground coffee.
just
They boil
traditional.
it. Okay.
No, just for like a flat white or something. I don't know. Like, I remember when I was young, 8 years old or whatever, I come outside or see my mum and my grandma or whatever, and they're having their coffee with the biscuits, those Arnott's biscuits. And so, oh, I just wanted my little snack before bed. I'm okay, cool. You do you, mum.
Yeah, you got to see the Arab coffee, man. The ones they make, mate. They get the ground coffee, mate. Put half the rack in there, boil it with water. Mate, they'll be drinking it all day. They'll drink it before bed, no problem. Like I said, they're just so immune to it. It's become part of them, and they don't even feel it. And like you said, until they actually get off it, try sleeping without coffee, and that's when they notice the massive difference.
Yeah, yeah. So I just thought of something as well. Like another good point we can talk as, for example, a pro for coffee. We haven't talked about the social aspect of it. Like, it's so normal to go, oh, let's go get a coffee, let's do this, let's do that. Like, as much as I'm bagging out the negatives of coffee, obviously there's positives as well. And like that's definitely one of them. Like my sort of halfway point, like I didn't want to be the guy that go, oh no, I'm not going with you guys because I don't drink coffee. I don't want to be, that dickhead. But my halfway point was like, all right, fair enough. We can still go get coffee. I'll have a tea. I'll have a herbal tea. Give me a ginger tea. Give me I don't know, fucking lemon and ginger, whatever you call it, right? So at least I'll still get to socialize and everything. So that was my halfway point. But yeah, we can't discount, the sociability aspect of it all as well.
Mate, I'd say half the population is just a social thing. I mean, you go on a date, take a girl out. I just don't know. I'm not sure about having a tea. Definitely having a coffee.
Yes. Yes. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people give me shit for it, but I'm like, I don't know, I'm hard-headed. I'm like, yeah, fuck you, man. I'm good. I'm gonna have my tea. You keep drinking your coffee. But yeah, it's definitely that manly thing, right? Like I get it. It's like that masculine. It's oh, yeah, teas for pussies, teas for women, blah blah blah. It's kind of like the meditation thing. Like so many people go, oh, that's for females. I used to be like that, like meditation. Oh no, that's for females. And then it's when it's like I try and use it for the benefits. I'm like, wow, man, this shit just ain't for females. This is like the benefits of meditation are just crazy. Mind state's so much better and all of that as well. So
I
yeah,
had that.
definitely.
I had that attitude towards meditation. I thought, yeah, hippie shit, earthing and nature walks and sunshines and meditation and breath work. Stuff's life changing, man. That's if you want to go down that route, that's sort of now my pre-workout. Breath work now is my pre-workout. But like I said, again, that's another topic for another conversation.
So in terms of the social aspect of coffee, like, most people have one in the morning. In some countries, like in France, they have one after lunch. In North America, oftentimes, here in Australia as well, you'll go for another coffee at 2 to 3 p.m. And then maybe you go for a coffee date in the evening at around 6. So it almost seems like we're overdoing it as a society and as a culture.
Yeah, definitely. But it's the normal, right? Everyone does it. It's how can you say, if you think about it from like a psychological standpoint, if everyone's doing something crazy and I'm not, I'm the crazy one, because now that's normal, right? But it's like, if would you jump off a bridge if John did it? It's like, well, fuck, if every single person in the world was jumping off that bridge, it's like we're all the crazy one not to. So yeah, it's like, it's how a lot of people are afraid to do certain changes because they're afraid of the stigma of being an outcast. So like I was saying before, if I'm the only one that doesn't drink coffee and I have tea, I'm the fucking weirdo. Even though if we were trying to analyze all those points that I brought up already, and it's like, well, this is the reason I'm doing it. That's the reason I'm doing it. I'm taking care of my gut health. I'm making sure that my dopamine receptors are strong and healthy and that I actually get the benefits of the caffeine and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, if you look at it from a non-biased standpoint, all those points being considered, it would sound like I'm trying to do the right, healthy thing for my body, right? But like, it's the same thing with diet. Like, if all your family and all your friends are unhealthy and you're the one doing the diet, people kind of make you feel bad for it. So, oh no, just be like us, because they're deep down, it's like you're doing something that they can't. So it's like they want to drag you down to their level so they can feel better about themselves. So it's kind of the same thing in this situation. It's like, oh, he can give up coffee. No, be like me. So I feel better about myself. Like, you understand what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that's, again, we can't discount the positives of caffeine. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It can be used, for the right circumstances. But yeah, it's interesting when you analyze that stuff from a psychological standpoint. How we all behave and like group think, and I don't want to be left out. I don't want to be the outcast and all of that. So yeah, it's like that masculine. How do you say? How we give each other shit. It's normal. It's like you tease each other, blah blah blah, like fucking normal. But that's where you got to try and find that little fine balance. I fucking managed fine. Or every cafe trip I went to, I had the tea. My mates gave me shit. I told them, fuck off, and everything's all good. We had a fun time. But see, a lot of people are scared. They're like, oh, they're going to tease me, and I'm going to feel like an outcast because I have the tea. I better have a coffee so I can fit in. But yeah, it's like you just got to fix up that mindset and stick to your guns.
It's about 25 milligrams of caffeine in tea. Is that right, Andrew? Or that depends on which tea you have, right?
Exactly. So I don't really have your black tea or your green tea. I normally just stick to the herbal ones. So, ginger or whatever. It's good with digestion. Doesn't taste that bad and gets the job done. I'm still social.
I find when I'm doing a lot of work, like if I've got to do a lot of, I've got to do a bit of book work, got to do a bit of admin work or write some programs. It becomes unconscious. Like I don't even, like I get the coffee, but it's become so immune that it just becomes unconscious to me. That's it. No, okay, just gonna get the coffee for the sake of getting the coffee. So it gets to that point as well. So
habit.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, becomes like that's how people don't realize. Maybe people forget how many they have a day. This comes out of habit. It's unconscious.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You go do a bit of book work, you do a bit of admin work, you walk past the cafe. Yeah, I'll grab a coffee. Not that it does anything to me, but hey, I'm just going to get a coffee. Sit at a cafe and get a coffee and do my work.
Yeah,
I'm like that too. Like when I have a really busy day, I'm like, oh, I got to get an extra coffee today. Or if I have a really important meeting and I need to be really switched on, I'm like, oh, I gotta go get another one.
Do you find that it works for you, Marcus?
Yeah, it does. If I have an extra one, it works. Or sometimes I go with some of these energy drinks and they really work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just check your energy drink now, Marcus. How much sugar's in there and how much caffeine's in there?
I go for the no sugar, so it doesn't have any sugar. But in terms of caffeine, we got 160 milligrams
Okay, well, it's about 2
Is
cups
that
of coffee.
total for the whole thing?
for the whole thing.
Was that okay? That's not too bad.
And then we got all the other shit in there as well.
Yeah.
Guarana.
Speaking of which, Andrew, you mentioned earlier that caffeine also has certain positive effects like the antioxidants, for example. I'm just curious, if I was to have an energy drink or let's say a pre-workout, and by the way, I know lots of guys in the corporate world, in the white collar world that instead of coffee, they actually have a pre-workout in the morning because they find that it's more potent and stronger. And perhaps some of the other substances in there give it a synergistic effect. But do you get the antioxidants?
No.
You don't get the antioxidants, huh? Okay.
So it's like when you sort of separate the caffeine from the coffee bean, right? So like the caffeine is what gives you the effects, but it doesn't have the actual antioxidants. So when you actually have a coffee, that's one of the benefits because now I'm getting the antioxidants and everything as well. Whereas if you just have the caffeine itself, it's like, yeah, you got the performance benefits, but now you're missing out on those other benefits. So it's like pros and cons, right? It just depends what you're trying to do. But yeah, definitely not. The energy drinks, although you may feel more stimulus, it's definitely the other downsides as well. And we can't sort of discount the fact of, the artificial this, preservative that, blah, 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 this, fucking all that other stuff, and the effects that would all have on the gut as well. And just a real quick little side note on that. I don't want to go too far down the gut health route, but from experience dealing with a lot of people that have gut issues, you find that every single person that I've tested has gut issues to some degree or another. Like obviously some people are going to have more gut issues than other, and that's just because of modern lifestyle and all the little bad things that we put in our body. That's normal again. And those energy drinks, although are quick and convenient, they're definitely going to be doing the gut a lot more harm than say, just a regular cup of coffee. So, and again, it's one of those things. If you're younger, you're obviously going to get away with it longer because you've had less time on this earth to do damage to your body. And, the older you get, the more damage has been done. So the more health risk you're going to have as well. So there are all these little pros and cons that you should weigh up. And the biggest thing that I've noticed is most people don't stop to analyze all of this stuff. So it's like, just go on with their life. It's like, oh, I drink this, drink that, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, they never actually stop to think like, okay, how much of this do I have a day? How much of that do I have a day? What are the effects? This, that, whatever. And Mick, I know you know a bit about this stuff as well. It's so many people have symptoms of this, symptoms of that, and they never stop to think why. It's not normal. It's like, oh, I get headaches every day. Cool. What are you doing? Because it's not normal. They just think, oh, that's me. It's like, oh, I have IBS. Oh, that's just me. No, you're doing something to cause that. What are you doing to cause that? So this is another thing that we can sort of analyze where if people have gut issues, well, are you taking into account the effect that the coffee is having with that? It's like, for example, IBS. So, oh, I have IBS and I have 3 cups of coffee a day. Oh, maybe you should stop that for a bit and, fix up X, Y, Z and fix your gut health. And then maybe you can come back to having coffee. So like, that's one of the reasons, because I've dealt with a few gut issues myself. So when you're dealing with, depending on how bad the gut is and depending what issues you're dealing with, coffee is one of those things you should be eliminating because it does put stress on the digestive system as well. And yeah, it's just, as a society, we're very unaware of all the things that are damaging our system. And I was sort of alluding to this before, if everyone does something and it's considered normal, we just sort of go along with that. But if you look at health issues, we just consider it normal. Oh, you get headaches, normal. Oh, you have IBS, normal. Oh, you're lactose intolerant, normal. It's like, no, it's not. Just because everyone has these issues, we just think, oh, that's how we're supposed to be. But it's not. It's just because the majority are that way, we think it's normal, but that's not actually how it works. And we can use that same analogy. Like, if everyone was, doing X, let's say everyone was doing something crazy, I'm the crazy one for not doing it. So yeah, it's an interesting thing that most people don't stop to think about.
The symptoms you mentioned, Andrew, they're common, but not normal. Yeah, everyone's got them, but nah, not normal. And obviously, when they're having their dairy and milk with their coffees, obviously dairy wreaks havoc on you. And in my opinion, no one should be consuming any dairy products. But like I said, when you're having it with your coffee, that's when it gets a bit more problematic. So
it's I don't know how far we should go on to that topic, but just a little quick side note. So when it comes to dairy, how am I going to explain this one? So the thing with dairy and pasteurization and everything, a lot of people think, again, it's normal. It's a thing, or I should say it's common. Pasteurization is like the norm when it comes to dairy products. And we think that it's supposed to be that way. It's killing off all the bacteria. What a lot of people don't realize is the enzymes in dairy to digest dairy properly are killed off in the pasteurization process. And we've also, it's normal. Oh, you shouldn't have raw dairy. That's bad for you. No, it's actually the opposite. Raw dairy is extremely good for you. And the pasteurization process kills off all the good nutrients that we should be having. And if you look at, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. This was something I was speaking about with my mentor, and the numbers are actually crazy. Like I just remember there was an extreme difference. So the reason that dairy is banned in Australia, for example, from memory, it was close to Byron Bay or somewhere close to Byron Bay. This 8-year-old, I think he was 8, something around that age, and he had a ton of health problems. Anyway, so like we need to acknowledge that initially. So he already had a ton of health problems. Then he consumed some raw dairy. Then he ended up in hospital because his digestive system couldn't handle the raw dairy, right? But is it the raw dairy's fault or the ton of health problems' fault? Anyway, so this was like, and if you look at the numbers, I can't, again, my mentor was telling me it was something extreme. There's like one in an extremely high number. It could be 100,000, could be a million. Like one in an extremely high number end up in hospital for raw dairy. But then you look at something like consuming, I don't know, for Panadine, it's like 1 in 5,000 end up in hospital. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, Panadine's normal or Panadol's normal, raw dairy's not. But look at the numbers. Like when you look on paper, raw dairy is extremely safe, Panadol's not safe. So again, it's one of those things that's normal, not normal. And you think about, like, again, things people don't stop to think about. Are you trying to, and we can tie this back to testosterone and steaks and eggs and cholesterol and saturated fat and blah, blah, blah. Our ancestors were living for thousands of years on these types of foods and they were thriving. You know what I mean? So, but now it's normal to, oh no, take this pill, take that pill, have your soy, have your fucking wheat, have your bagel, have your this, have your that. And that's all the normal. And now people have health problems. People didn't have health problems eating all the natural stuff, but now we do. But they don't see that correlation. When it's like, well, yeah, they didn't have health problems because that's the way we're supposed to eat. That's got all the nutrients, right amino acid balance, X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. But it's just this sort of clown world matrix programming that have made people think, oh no, carbs, sugar, and this and that is good for you. And the artificial sweeteners and me taking my tablets and my SSRIs and blah, blah, blah is good for me. Yeah, it's like
steaks are bad
crazy.
for you, red meat's bad for you, and saturated fats are bad for you. Hey, that's like I said, we can go on and on and on.
Yeah, like just touching on that real quick, just touching on that, exactly what you just said there. Like we've been brainwashed to think cholesterol is bad for us, but cholesterol is the precursor to your sex hormones, mainly testosterone. So if you don't have cholesterol, you can't make testosterone. Crazy. It's almost like something is trying to keep us from having high testosterone.
Oh fuck! Jeez, I wonder what that could be.
Yeah.
Well, we plan on doing this show every 2 weeks for the listeners at home. So stay tuned and we might dive into these topics a little bit more, Andrew. Sounds like you're really passionate about that one. So yeah, maybe next episode we might cover that one. That one's actually an interesting one. But back to coffee. Mick, you made an interesting point in that because Andrew, you're saying that caffeine, is it the caffeine or is it the coffee that has the negative effects on gut health?
It's kind of both. Like, so if we look at the actual coffee beans themselves, this is where we can run into issues with like mycotoxins, which is like a form of mold that's found on most coffee beans. And so that would have effects on your health. But then you've also got the actual effects of caffeine, which can, speed up the digestive process, irritate the gut lining, cause IBS and a bunch of other things. So yeah, it's kind of from two different angles. So you can get bad effects from both angles.
And Mick, you mentioned that dairy has some negative effects on gut health. So is adding a bunch of cream or milk to your coffee, is that kind of adding insult to injury and making it even worse?
Look, I think so. Just look, the fact that when a client comes to me, first thing I say to him is, first 30 days, no dairy, no gluten. And I'll go by feel. After that 30 days, how do you feel? If they've got positive, if they feel better, no bloating, no gassing, all that sort of stuff, all those, all these other problematic gut issues. Okay, then now we know dairy is not good for you. Stay off the dairy. But I think where coffee gets complicated, where it starts to play up with the GI tract, is when you have too much of it. I personally, through experience, I found having too much coffee when I was having like 5 or 6 a day. That's when it really messed up my guts. So, and when, as Andrew was saying, with the mycotoxin, with the mold, so every time I have Starbucks coffee, it has the adverse effect. It has the opposite effect. I don't get the hit. So point being, stay away from Starbucks coffee, because that coffee is just full of mold, full of mycotoxins. It doesn't. I try to stick with the organic coffee bean.
So where do you get the organic toxin-free coffee from? Where do you get that from? Andrew, you mentioned earlier that your typical vegan or more health-oriented cafe might have those, but if you want to buy some to brew yourself, where would you get some?
So I normally see, it's like, for example, if you do like the gut health stuff, there's a lot of the supplements or foods that are hard to find in certain stores. So for example, if you go to your local supermarket, they're probably not going to have this stuff. So unless you know of a specialty store in person, it's more so going to be a lot harder to find these things in person. So me personally, I just order it online. So I just type in what I want and get it from there. Amazon's got a few good ones. I had a look. And then there's, I just normally look on Google, find, this, that, or the other. But the things to look for, if you're wanting to have a good quality coffee, there's a few different types you can get. So you can get high altitude coffee beans, which basically what happens, that the coffee plants that are grown in high altitude have very low mycotoxins. That's just because in general, you don't need to put pesticides on them as much, because, the high altitudes, there's less insects and animals that, you need to protect the beans from. Then like the other thing would be, like you got your wet processed coffee beans. So that's like, they're sun dried and there's less mycotoxins and all that than the standard ones. And then you can just get your standard mycotoxin free certified coffee, which, would be grown in the particular way that's not going to have any mycotoxins on them. But the easiest way to do it is just go on Google, type in mycotoxin free coffee, get an organic one if you can as well, so there's no pesticides on them as well. And that will be the best way to get your healthiest option for coffee.
You can get it from supermarkets.
They got it.
Yeah, they got organic coffees. Nice. Absolutely.
Yeah. But is it mycotoxin free organic or just organic?
Good question. I'll have to look into that, but I'd say just organic.
Yeah. That's like a lot of, like, if you look at a lot of health related things, it's all well and good that, you're trying to get organic, but there's other factors you've got to take into play. So for example, if you look at beef, I got organic beef. Cool. Was it grass-fed? Because if you look at beef, it's one of those things where in the majority of cases, it's actually better to go get a grass-fed beef that's not organic as opposed to a organic beef that's not grass-fed. You know what I mean? So it's like organic's a good thing, but there's more to it in certain situations. Like, if you can find a grass-fed organic beef, great, awesome. But it's very difficult to find. Like I've tried to find it myself as well. Easy to find grass-fed, and a lot of places have grass-fed, but it's a lot harder to find a grass-fed organic. So yeah, it's like the nuances of little things. And yeah, when it comes to the coffee, me personally, I would rather have a mycotoxin-free that wasn't organic as opposed to organic that wasn't mycotoxin-free. But I've found looking online, it is pretty, it's manageable. It's manageable to find both. You can find a mycotoxin-free organic. So yeah, that's what I personally would go for.
I'd say most cafes will have mycotoxin-free caffeine as opposed to organic, because they seem to be doing the job for me. Like I said, when I have Starbucks coffees, opposite effect, man. It has the complete opposite effect to me. It puts me to sleep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, being in Bondi, I mean, they're all pretty health freaks here. They're all, like they very much into their health, and I think the coffee's pretty safe down here, man. So
Yeah. You should ask it next time, bro. Yeah, can I see your coffee bag? See what's on it.
yeah, I might do that actually. They usually have them up top on display, so I'll take a close look at it next time.
Yeah, nice, man.
And for the guys watching, if you hit up your local supermarket and find out whether that quote unquote organic is mycotoxin free or not, let us know. We'd be curious to know it as well as to sort of what proportion of supermarkets do have genuinely mycotoxin free coffee. And that's some knowledge that we can share with the rest of the audience. But so Mick, you said that you feel different when you have your corporate coffee, your Starbucks coffee, to when you have your gourmet coffee at a very health conscious cafe there in Bondi Beach, where everyone is health conscious. And that would make sense, since the folks living at Bondi Beach are very health conscious. So it would make sense that they would expect mycotoxin free organic coffee. And so you said you feel different. How about you, Andrew? Do you feel different when you have mycotoxin free as opposed to, let's say, your Starbucks coffee?
It's hard to say because I don't like have much coffee in general. When
right.
I do have it,
yeah,
I don't really go to Starbucks as well, so it's a bit hard to say.
Okay, interesting. Well, maybe that's another insight that the audience can gather for us as well. Is if you haven't tried yet, try some mycotoxin free coffee, try some Starbucks coffee, and see how you feel. And if you feel different, let us know. Or either way, let us know, and we could share those insights with the rest of the audience.
I mean, I'd say each to their own, Marcus. I mean, I think it's just all about trialing their own. Like, just give it a go. I mean, that's personally for me. Starbucks coffee does that to me. Look, I'm not, like I said, I'm not wouldn't say I'm an expert on the coffee topic, but yeah, I'd say Starbucks coffee that's got a lot of mold in it. Try it out. I'd say there's a Starbucks near you.
Yeah, there's
Marcus,
Starbucks everywhere.
No, the little island I'm on at the moment is definitely not a Starbucks. Maybe if I get back to when I get back to Athens, I can check it out. But yeah, it's interesting. Look, when you look at the mold. So like we're sort of, if you look at most cafes in the world, like if you were to put a percentage on which cafes are using mycotoxin free and which aren't, man, we could argue 99% of the world's cafes are using coffee beans that have mycotoxins in them, right? So it's only going to be a select few health conscious ones that aren't, and that's a problem. Like if you look at the effects of mold, Mick, I'm sure you would know how bad that is. Like mold's going to wreak havoc on your gut, and the problem is most people are having coffees with mold in them day in, day out. So we can imagine how much problem that's giving the gut over time. Like we don't even have to talk about the coffee itself. We can talk about the mycotoxins, and this could be one of the reasons why so many people have gut issues these days. Among with all the other ones as well. So again, it's so how I was talking about that 10 out of 10 thing. It's like, oh, this is my 10 out of 10. So many people are like, okay, I live day in, day out with this energy and this, virility and blah, blah, blah. This is my normal. This is my 10 out of 10. It's like, well, just because that's what you perceive right now doesn't mean you couldn't be better. And if people are living with gut issues, their perceived 10 out of 10 is like really a 5 or a 6. If they fixed up everything and their health was better, they'd be at a true 10 out of 10. And yeah, that's like we could call that like a, to some extent, you could call it like a health pandemic in a way. We could relate that back down to the testosterone pandemic that we're sort of seeing, the decrease in the testosterone levels as well, which we can talk about on the next podcast. But yeah, there's a lot of things when it comes to coffees, such as I just mentioned, where people aren't taking into account how much potential damage it's doing. I'm not saying everyone's going to be wrecked having coffee. Definitely not saying that at all, but some people are more prone to having, issues from the coffee itself. Like, I'm sure we've all heard or experienced that time where you have a coffee and you got to run straight to the bathroom. But again, it's like, that's not necessarily a good thing. You know what I mean? Like if it's stimulating your GI tract and causing you to have IBS, just because you've gotten used to that, it's now normal, doesn't mean it's good, right?
I think they say caffeine is some sort of form of a diuretic. they say.
Yeah.
Because I've had that instance where, used to be anyway, first thing in the morning, straight to the toilet. Couldn't go to the toilet without it, actually. So yeah, that's just one of those things.
So on a cup of coffee, if it's not mycotoxin free, you got those mycotoxins, you have the mold, then you have the caffeine itself boosting up the adrenaline levels in your GI tract, causing it to to kind of get ahead of itself and other side effects. But and then Mick, you mentioned the dairy, and so the takeaways that I'm getting here so far is, get mycotoxin free beans, and then maybe take it easy on the dairy, on the cream. But what about the sweetener? I've heard I've heard conflicting things about sweeteners. So I'm wondering if I should put I definitely don't put sugar in my coffee, but the sweetener okay? The sweetener, I've heard, I've heard, if you look at the literature, like from Health Canada or the FDA, they've done studies on artificial sweeteners over the course of 30 years, and they insist that there's no negative effects whatsoever from sweeteners. But I hear conflicting views on that. Some people say that artificial sweeteners can wreak havoc on your gut as well. So is putting that sweetener in also adding injury to insult in terms of gut health?
I'd say when it comes to sugar, you're going to get that instant high, and then you're going to crash, right? That's the thing with sugar. I'd say anything artificial in it, it's not good. It's just got some bad stuff in it. That's really, again, they're going to play havoc on your guts. I'd say natural sweeteners like stevia wouldn't be too bad with your coffee. That's a natural sweetener. It's not too bad. I'd say like sugar or like anything or artificial sweeteners. But I think it's one of those things, Marcus, where you just it's trial and error. You got to trial it for yourself, especially with the dairy too. Like if it's not problematic for you individually, then by all means. But trial it. Maybe go 30 days with no dairy or no sugar in your coffee, and just see how you feel. Just go by feel, because everybody's different. But I'd say most people won't tolerate dairy properly.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, it's hard because there's so many things when you look at proper health related things, like for example the mycotoxins. It's like then you got to go find a place that does mycotoxin free coffee, or if you live in an area that doesn't, then that can be a hard thing. If you're used to going to a cafe for your coffee, then you can't really do that. So it can be restrictive in certain ways, but it just depends on how bad do you want it. Like this is another topic as well. Like a lot of people say, it's like, oh, I want to be healthy, but it's like, oh, I'm not willing to do X, Y, Z. Well, you don't want it bad enough, because if you did, you'd deal with it, right? But when you look at all the things when it comes to health, so for example, the other thing we were talking about, like dairy, how I was saying, okay, well, the reason most people don't handle dairy is because it's pasteurized and we want to have raw dairy. Well, then it's like, all right, in Australia, it's illegal to have raw dairy, so you can't really get that at the cafe that you want to go to, and X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. So it makes things really difficult. But if I was to say, all right, I want to have the most healthy coffee that I could possibly have, and I'm willing to have it at home, and I'm willing to sacrifice going to a cafe or blah, 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 like how would I personally do it? First of all, it'll be mycotoxin-free coffee. If I wanted to have sweetener, same as Mick said, it would be stevia. I wouldn't go for the actual artificial stuff. And it's like we were kind of talking about before. Most people that you speak to, or that I speak to anyway, if you ask them the question, do you trust the government? Most people say no. So I always take studies with a grain of salt. I know a lot of people will call me crazy with that, like, oh, it couldn't be possible, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's be real. Whoever's listening to this that thinks I'm crazy, I want you to try to be non-biased and honestly think about what I'm about to tell you. If I run a multi-billion-dollar company, or even multi-million-dollar company, and I want everyone to think that my product is safe, first of all, do you think that a lot of companies out there, a lot of these very, very high net worth companies out there, are more concerned with your profits or more concerned with your health? Like, let's be honest. Do you really think they give a fuck about your health if they can get away with it? right?
No brainer.
So that's the first thing. So if I got, if I can potentially make millions in profit, would it be in my benefit to bribe certain people to show the results that I want? Let's say I can make $500 million if I give a $10 million bribe to 15 scientists or whatever, right? Now, I know that sounds crazy, but let's think about it. Like, is it really that crazy? I can make 500 million from my product if I bribe 10 million. That's a good investment, right? That's a good business decision if you're corrupt and you don't give a shit about people's health. So we could argue that point. So it's like you get people to try and think, you're like, all right, so you don't trust the government for this, but you trust them to do that study right. Anyway, something to think about for people. So anyway, even though these certain studies say that artificial sweeteners are safe, I'm very wary. I'm happy to debate anyone that brings that up. Like, let's have a logical discussion about it. Like, use your brain. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it couldn't be that bad. Oh, it couldn't. People are corrupt. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. If you got a lot of money, you can make anything you want happen. But a lot of people don't want to accept that reality. Anyway, so going back to what I would recommend to minimize the potential damages, even though you say this is safe, blah, 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 I would much rather deal with a natural substance like stevia. Okay, cool. You can have your safe artificial things, whatever you want to call them. I personally would stick to organic mycotoxin-free coffee. I would have raw dairy if I'm able to source it. If I'm not, I'll stick to black coffee. And if I wanted sweetener, I'd have stevia. So the thing is, if we look at both sides of the thing, let's say we've got the science guys that says, yes, it is safe. And then we've got the organic health guys that say it is safe. Well, the organic health guys would say, no, your science shit is not safe. I'm not going to take it. But the science guys cannot possibly say the organic and the stevia is bad for you. It's like, there's no argument that that's good for you, but there is argument that that's good for you. So I'd rather just stick to the side where there's no risk whatsoever. So that's my take on it.
100% agree. That's a good point. Good way to put it, Andrew.
But Andrew, a lot of folks, myself included, we took the sugar out of our coffee because we wanted to make the health conscious choice by getting rid of the sugar, and because coffee just tastes better when it's sweet, and switching over to an artificial sweetener. So now you're saying we have to be a little bit more conscious with the type of artificial sweetener as well, and try to go with something organic like stevia. But what negative effects does that artificial sweetener have? Can you tell us a little bit about that, just so we can make the right choice?
So first of all, I would say it's mainly the gut stuff, like the negative effects on the gut. And then you could sort of argue the fact of, how do you say, we call it a flavor enhancer. So I'm kind of going to relate it back to MSG, even though it's not necessarily what they're using in your coffee. But it's kind of the same thing. Like, MSG has been argued to be like a neurotoxin. And again, it's one of those things where people say, oh, but the science says this. Yeah, cool. But there's so much anecdotal evidence to show that people are having very, very bad effects when they consume MSG. And it's like basically considered a neurotoxin. Like, when you look at the chemistry of how it works, it's not that good for us. So it could be argued the same thing. Like, I know that, what was it, the aspartame? I think the science says you need 20. Yeah. Like the science says you need like 25 times the dose that you consume to have the bad effects. It's like, cool. Again, my same argument will be the other thing. It's like, all right, so, just because they say this, could those results have been manipulated? Is there, an agenda there that would, lead to profits? So I just don't want to risk it. So it definitely does irritate the gut lining to some degree. Whether it's going to be toxic at the dose you're having, maybe not. Are we going to live if we consume some aspartame? Yeah. I'm not saying you're going to die from one dose of it, but it's kind of like, how do we say, breaking down, if you want to call it like breaking down the door or whatever, like time over time, like how much dose are you going to have to over time it's going to cause some issues? And we could even just like, don't even talk about this in relation to the artificial sweeteners. We could even say this in relation to the coffee, like we were saying with the mycotoxins. All right, cool. You're young and you just started having coffee, within your first 5 years, you don't feel much. But how much over time, eventually, till that starts causing damage? So it's like, all right, cool, one dose here, one dose there, you're going to be fine. But do you want to be having that day in, day out when over time it's, going to be causing all those issues? And a very easy to understand example of this, and again, this is another thing where people perceive this as normal. Old people. How many old people have health issues? So many, to the point where it's normal. It's just like, oh yeah, you get old and you have health issues. No, that's not how it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to get old and have health issues because you got old. No, it's because you've been doing that little bit of amount of damage year after year after year after year, and you've been alive for longer than what I have. So your body has been damaged for a lot longer than what mine has. You know what I mean? So like all these things that do damage to the gut lining and eventually cause health issues, over time, your body can't take it anymore and you get, health problems, but we perceive that as normal. Oh, 99% of the elderly population has X health issue. That's normal. No, that's average. Doesn't mean it should be that way. So like that's another thing to take into account. And again, whenever I would encourage anyone that's listening, whenever there's profits to be made, just second guess it. Like just because there's a study that says this, just because there's 10 studies that say this. Okay, cool. Let's play devil's advocate here. Let's consider that I don't care about people's health and I just want to make profits and I've got billions of dollars. And if I spend 50 million, I can make another 500 million from that. So I'll get a 10 times ROI, right? Think about it in business terms. So if I got no morals and I don't give a shit, that's a good business investment. If I spend 50 million and get 500 million back, that's a good business investment. So you guys tell me, anyone listening, tell me, if I have power, connections, XYZ, and I got hundreds of millions of dollars, do you not think that I couldn't go and bribe enough people to make what I want? So the results that I want to show, you don't think I could make that happen? Like, don't even think of it, like, don't even think about it like a conspiracy. Think about it in logic. Do you think I can make certain studies say what I want to say if I spend enough money? And I think if anyone's being truly honest and non-biased about how they're thinking about that, I think any smart person would agree. Like, well, yeah, it's possible. Don't even say it's happening. Is it possible? So yeah, it's definitely an interesting way of looking at things. That's for sure.
So Andrew, okay, so the artificial sweeteners could potentially be detrimental. What's ironic there is that you have that cup of coffee with the artificial sweetener for cognitive performance, but then you're saying it could potentially be a neurotoxin. So that's kind of ironic.
So it's like benefits now, danger later kind of thing.
I see.
Like a trade-off.
So, all right. So if your typical coffee shop has uses caffeine beans full of mold and these mycotoxins and either sugar or artificial sweetener that potentially might be bad for you, that might irritate your gut lining and also damage your brain cells, basically. What do you think about? I'm almost thinking to myself of why don't I just take caffeine pills? So could that be a solution to the problem of? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the other benefit when you take caffeine pills, you can get certain formulas that have L-theanine in them to balance off, the jitters and the anxiety that you could get from caffeine. So that's like another pro that you could get from the caffeine pills as well. But it's definitely a good solution. But then you sort of miss, the sociability aspect, which you can get rid of if you have some tea. But yeah, it's all just weighing up the pros and cons. I'm not telling, I'm just saying my opinion, right? So I'm not telling people they have to do what I do. I'm just saying, this is what I do because of XYZ. I don't want to risk these health conditions. So like just a little quick side note on the artificial sweeteners. Like that argument I was just saying. If you look at the organic argument, it's like, well, the science side can't say there's anything bad about this. Like, there's no risk. It's like, well, they're saying, well, we're safe. You don't need to do that. But you can't say the same thing for them. So a very easy solution for most people is, look, carry some, if you're getting coffee at work, bring your own stevia. Get your coffee, go there, put your own shit in there. You know what I mean? But it's like, oh, now I've made life hard. I've got to get my own sweetener. Oh, that's too hard for me. I can't handle it. People are very weak and, any excuse they can't do it. So, like I said, where there's a will, there's a way. If you really want something to work, you can make it work. Like I just said, the easy solution would be, first of all, if you really want it, bring your own coffee, get your own mycotoxin-free coffee, use the kettle at work, do your own thing, and bring your own stevia. There, bam, solution. Don't have raw dairy. Solution. It still tastes decent with the stevia in there. So there you go. But again, a lot of people out there are just, oh, it's inconvenient. Oh, I gotta buy this. Oh, I can't do it. Oh, fuck it. I'll just deal with the health consequences. Cool, bro. Don't complain when you have fucking symptoms, right?
See, my take on artificial sweeteners, I'd say, look, I just like I said, I'd say if it's artificial, it's man-made. Anything man-made, just be wary of it. That's just my conclusion on the artificial sweeteners. Yeah, like Andrew was saying, yeah, it's a little bit. It's not going to kill you, but over time, you're going to build up all that stuff in your body. Yeah, it's going to get detrimental. It's going to be harmful to your body. So just be wary of it. You can have a black coffee with nothing in there. I mean, I'd say people that have sugar or artificial sweeteners will be more for the social thing rather than the actual mood enhancement and the brain power. So yeah, like I said, if it's artificial, okay, yeah, man-made, okay, yeah, I better stay away from that.
So for guys watching who have very demanding jobs that require high performance, another trend I've noticed, I've seen recently is gamers having these pre-workout drinks as cognitive enhancers. So maybe those guys might want to take it easy a bit as well, given the amount of artificial substances and artificial sweeteners that are in those. And maybe caffeine pills are a good alternative for them as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's other things you can take as well, like nootropics. That's another thing that's big at the moment. And me personally, like I got a real basic nootropic stack that I have as needed. Like I don't like having things every day, just because of the downsides, the desensitization. I don't want to rely on it, all the other stuff I was talking about. But yeah, there's other things that you can have. For example, if you have certain gut issues, like I was saying before, you don't want to have the caffeine maybe until you fix up those gut issues. So it's not to say forever, but just take out the irritants until things are better. But there's other things that you can have that aren't going to have the same negative effects. Like, for example, you could have lion's mane mushroom, you can have phosphatidylserine, you can have alpha GPC, you can have L-theanine. Like these are all like, you call them nootropics. There's definitely stronger things out there like the racetams and all that. But, if you're worried about the potential health effects of the caffeine, there's other things that you can have that still give you a good little boost. So me personally, I was taking the alpha GPC and phosphatidylserine, a combo with that on an as needed basis, like 2 or 3 days out of the week. And it was good. Like I got no downside, no, desensitization, tolerance, anything like that. I could stop it as needed. I could bring it on whenever I wanted. And you feel that little boost. Like it's not when you have those type of things, it's more like a clarity and focus kind of effect, as opposed to caffeine. It's like you can feel like, for example, me, if I have coffee now, it's like a stimulant. Like you can definitely feel like I'm, faster, if you want to call it that. Whereas the other one's more so just the clarity, focus, and all of that. So yeah, there's definitely other things you can have that could, still give you some improvements with much less potential side effects, and worrying about addiction and tolerance and all of that as well.
You made an interesting point there, Andrew, in that because you don't drink it regularly, when you take caffeine, it is a stimulant for you. It speeds up your brain processing and really gets it going. Whereas for most of us, for most people, we just need it just to get our day going as normal. So it's like for most of society, caffeine just gets us to our baseline. But if you want caffeine to be a performance enhancer that it's supposed to be, perhaps what you might want to do is, taper off regular and heavy usage of caffeine and take it when you really do need that extra performance and that extra ability.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's I like what you said there, like taper off. Learn from my experience, don't come off a cold turkey. It's depending on how much you're having. If you're only having 1 coffee a day, you probably deal with it. But yeah, it's like I said before, there's all addictions work off the same pathway, the dopamine pathway. So you don't just want to cut it all off. And even if we relate that back to how habits work, Mick, you would know about this, dealing with clients overcoming certain bad habits. When you look at habits, there's a habit reward system. So there's a really good book, The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg. If you guys are worried about like performance, definitely hit up that book. It's like there's cue, routine, reward. And the thing with habits is you can't delete a habit. You can replace a habit. This is why, example, when people smoke cigarettes, if they quit cold turkey, they normally gain weight. And the reason they gain weight is because their body is searching for another outlet for dopamine. So they normally replace that by eating more food. So it's like, it's like, oh, cool, I got rid of this dopamine stimulant, and then subconsciously I eat more, right, to replace that dopamine here. So yeah, it's the same sort of thing with coffee. Again, it's a dopamine here. So if you're coming off, have a plan. The easiest way is to wean off or just replace that bad habit with something else. Or in the case of coffee, it's not necessarily bad, but replace that habit with something else and have a plan for it. Yeah.
I'd say, Marcus, if you have to get through the day, I mean, if you're having coffee just to get through the day, I'd say you've got bigger problems. I mean, like I said, I'd say just, all around, I'd say coffee, is it bad for you? Probably not. But if you need it to get through the day, like I said, you got bigger problems. And I'd say you've got to definitely make some better lifestyle choices in regards to your sleep, into your hydration, into your nutrition, and all other things. Like I said, that's pretty much it. You get all those in order, get your sleep right, your hydrate, your nutrition. I'd say the biggest one will be sleep. You fix your sleep, and I'd say, honestly, you'll need 2 cups of coffee maximum. Personally, that's sort of my take on caffeine. So it becomes problematic when you need it to get through the day.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point, Mick. Like we were saying, everyone wants a shortcut. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, coffee is the answer to my energy problems. And just like you said, it was like, it could be your sleep, could be your nutrition. You're not training hard enough, so everything else isn't working good. You're not giving your body any reason to be strong, right? And everyone's sort of relying on the shortcut there. Like coffee is the energy boost. And exactly like we said about that perceived state of what's normal, like just because you function here, you think that's normal. So you're like, oh, well, coffee gets me here. Well, it's like, yeah, but if you fixed up your sleep, your nutrition, your recovery, it's like, well, your baseline will be here and you wouldn't need the coffee. You know what I mean? Like I work day in, day out without caffeine and I'm fine. My energy is nice and consistent throughout the day. My focus is good. Now, the other thing, exactly what I was saying about your perceived state of normal, things like brain fog, lack of energy, all of that sort of stuff, that can be caused by suboptimal health, by your gut health. You know what I mean? Like your gut is the foundation of health. And if that's not right, you're not going to be functioning right. So it's almost like you're functioning at suboptimal and you're using the caffeine as a band-aid. And the problem is unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of room for improvement.
Can we talk about some of the other cognitive effects of caffeine? So obviously it makes you more alert. It reduces the fatigue, makes it easier to stay focused and motivated throughout the day, like we discussed. There's a few things that I've been curious about. What are caffeine's effects on creativity? Because a lot of guys in the corporate space, especially in the tech world, creativity is very important for them, and that's why they take substances like they microdose LSD and things like that. The Silicon Valley CEOs. What are caffeine's effects on creativity?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know about the creativity thing for coffee.
I think when it comes to creativity, I think it's a natural thing. I don't think it'll boost you. Like I said, it'll enhance your mood, it'll enhance your brain power. But when it comes to creativity, I think you've got to be looking at other aspects of your life, because the stuff we mentioned before.
Yes. What you mentioned, Marcus, about the microdosing. So I've looked into that a bit, which is interesting. So like, LSD or magic mushroom microdosing. And the creativity thing, as far as I can tell how it works from what I was looking at, is we normally use one particular part of our brain at a time. So, if we're focusing on a maths problem, we use this part of our brain. We're focusing on a creativity English thing, we're, using another part of our brain. And as far as I can tell, the way that the microdosing psychedelics work is it's allowing multiple parts of your brain to work at the same time. And that's, so for example, again, I'm just using a basic analogy for it. So it's like the maths problem solving part of my brain is working now at the same time that the English creativity part of my brain is working at. So they're working at the same time, which allows you to be more creative because you think in a unique way. So as far as I could tell, that's why that works. And yeah, you know, if all of those, you know, high-end Silicon Valley executives are using that, you know, to drive creativity, you can see how powerful effect that must have as well. It's definitely working.
So
I'd
my
say-
theory.
Sorry,
Sorry,
Marcus.
go
I'd say when I'm most creative is when I go for walks. And obviously, a lot of studies show that sort of bilateral movement, walking, cycling, walking on a treadmill, whatever you want to call them, whatever you want to do, that gets me heaps creative. I find that when I'm stuck, I can't solve a problem, I step away. When my mind's completely off the topic, I'll go for a walk. That's when I sort of can solve that sort of problem. So I'd say walking would be best for creativity.
It's actually
Personally,
insightful. No, that's very insightful, because my theory on caffeine and creativity has been that caffeine kind of does the opposite, because it fires up your adrenaline and your nervous system, which if you were to inject somebody with high, crazy levels of adrenaline, they would basically get tunnel vision, where they get intensely focused on one thing. And that's, as you said, Andrew, that's not creativity, because with creativity you need to be able to pay attention to all parts of your brain.
because you're in survival,
Yeah.
fight or flight.
Very good point. Very, very good point. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, exactly like you said. So the best way to be creative, you need to be calm and relaxed. So yeah, exactly from that standpoint, it's kind of like and again, like if we got to talk about the level of adrenaline and cortisol and, you know, adrenals, blah, 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 from the caffeine, it's obviously going to be minor compared to a fight or flight situation. But we can't deny the fact that, you know, let's say it's a 5% boost on your fight or flight system. You know, well, that's 5% more towards not being creative. So yeah, it's definitely going to, you know, negatively impact it from some aspect from that. But then we could kind of argue maybe the brain power could also help you be more creative. But then again, like you said, if you've noticed that anecdotally, there you go.
Well, maybe we could do some research on that and get back to the audience, because that's because I like to know. Because, you know, in the workplace, on one hand, you need raw and fast brain processing power, but you also need creativity to solve problems, right? So so I like to know, and I'm sure there's a lot of guys watching this that want to know. So let's get back to the audience on that. One more thing related to that is emotional control. Does caffeine tend to make you more irritable? I mean, my sense is that it makes you more irritable, and which could be problematic in the workplace, because, you know, in the workplace you have to get along with your colleagues, get along with folks, be patient with them, have good emotional control. Do you guys have any thoughts on caffeine's impact on sort of anger and irritability?
I'd say when you're coming off coffee, when you're going through having those withdrawals, you're definitely going to have less control.
Okay. Thanks for the heads up.
But in general, I don't think so. Yeah, you might get you a bit jittery and you'll be anxious, but I'd say personally, from my standpoint, probably not. But others, not too sure. But I don't think when it comes to caffeine and emotional control, I don't think there's a problem there. But definitely when you're coming off it, personally, yeah, you don't want to be around me when I was having my withdrawals. Absolutely not. Very angry, very moody.
So it's like being next to a drug addict coming off of whatever he's on.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay. Can we just talk about some of the physical effects of caffeine? Because, you know, a lot of guys watching this not only want to perform better cognitively in the workplace, or for the gamers playing their games, which for some of them is work. But a lot of guys watching this also just want to build up their physiques, build up an optimal physique for themselves. So what's caffeine's effects on muscle synthesis and fat gain, fat loss? Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Not too sure on actual muscle protein synthesis, but if we look at it from a fat loss standpoint, well, it's definitely, if it's speeding up the cortisol system, and that's going to sort of help with your fat loss and, releasing fat cells and blah, blah, blah. It can definitely help from a fat loss standpoint. It'll also help with your endurance as well. So like, your perceived rate of exertion, you can kind of go a little bit further because you've got that energy boost. So yeah, there's definitely performance, room for performance gains from caffeine. But then we can kind of go back to that other argument of, needing to rely on something to get a workout done. We could almost say it's like an insult to your ancestors in a way. Like, your ancestors, thousands of years ago, they had to go out hunting and get food and, get spears on mammoths and shit like that. And now you need a fucking coffee to get through your workout. Like, stop being a little bitch, like harden the fuck up kind of thing. So, but like that's a topic for another day, right? Like too many people these days, like I keep saying, they want the easy way out. Oh, I need a coffee to get it done, this, that, whatever. And again, if you're using it as a little boost here and there, cool. I've got no dramas with that. But if you need it, I need it to do my workout, man, you got bigger problems. Like you got to fix up your mind. You got to fix up your mindset. So yeah, again, pros and cons, definitely. Having to rely on it is definitely a bad thing. Like I said, if there was a day where you just wrecked and you got no energy and blah, 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 it's like, okay, have that coffee. This is the day you should use it so you can get the benefit from it. Cool, no dramas, right? But if it's, every single day, I had a perfect 8 hours sleep, everything's going great in my life, things are amazing, wife's taking care of this and, kids are happy and blah, blah, blah. Let me have a coffee every day to get through my workout. So come on, bro, like everything's going good, man. You like, harden the fuck up.
I'd say, Marcus, the mental benefits of having that coffee, the brain power and the mood enhancement, it's definitely going to give you that physical edge as well, because obviously the mind, body, they're intrinsically linked, man. So if you get that sort of that brain power and that mood enhancement from the caffeine, you're definitely going to push harder in the gym, man. So when you push harder, you can lift heavier, you can get bigger, you can get stronger, bigger muscles, and the drift. So highly recommend caffeine before a workout.
You made a funny point there, Andrew, about insulting your ancestors. So yeah, it's like you got to have either a coffee from Starbucks or you got to have this pina colada flavored pink pre-workout drink. Yeah, I kind of get your point there. All right, great. So we've kind of talked a lot about the negative effects of caffeine. We've talked about some positive effects, but are there any other positive effects of caffeine that we missed? We talked about the antioxidants and the boost that it can give you to your mental and physical performance if you're taking it as a picker-upper rather than a substance to function normally, like an addict. Are there any other benefits the audience would want to know about?
Yeah, definitely. Like I remember when I was having a look at some of the studies, so it can help with all forms of mortality, low risk of all forms of mortality. I think it was like 30% or something like that. Helps with like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and certain liver conditions as well. So there's definitely benefits. Yeah, definitely benefits for sure. I know I'm bagging on it a lot. I know I'm pissing off a lot of people, but yeah, there's definitely benefits as well.
It's also going to add to your fluids for the day too, right? You want to drink more water. Having coffee is going to add to your fluid for the day too. So that's not a positive.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess the key takeaway here is, caffeine is a powerful drug. It is a drug because if you take it consistently, you can become reliant on it. But it's a powerful stimulant and does have some potential positive benefits. So it sounds like anything, you have to take it in moderation. Sounds cliche, but too much of anything can be bad for you. And you got to take it the right way. So perhaps, like for me, the main takeaway so far has been, if I'm going to drink coffee regularly, get some of that mycotoxin-free organic caffeine. Take it easy on the dairy. Use a natural sweetener instead of the artificial sweetener that you know the jury's still out on. Maybe not have one after midday, since as you mentioned, Andrew, the quarter life is 12 hours. So maybe I might want to limit myself to, let's say, 1 in the morning, maybe 1 in the afternoon if I really need one. But in an ideal world, I think what you're saying, Andrew, is you shouldn't need caffeine to function normally. But if you need to use it as a picker upper on a day where you have on an atypical day where you haven't had enough sleep, or you have an unusually high workload, or a very stressful day, then or a very intense workout ahead of you, then maybe you use it as a picker upper, and in those instances you'll feel a much more powerful effect, as you both pointed out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good summary.
All right. Well, guys, that was very insightful for me. Very hopefully very insightful for the audience. Is there any other final points that you guys want to share, or any final views?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, look, if you're relying on coffee to get through the day, you may want to assess your life. Have a look at your sleep, look at your stress management, have a look at your nutrition. Yeah, like I said, keep it, as you mentioned earlier as well, no caffeine post 2 p.m. My take, is coffee good for you? I'll say there's more benefits than bad. That's my take, but maybe Andrew will disagree. But yeah, man, go for that coffee, man. Look, just keep it in moderation, as with everything.
All right. Well, I think that's a good note to end it. Andrew, Mick, if guys watching this have questions about anything you said, or want to learn more about some of the studies and science that you mentioned, where can they reach you?
So you can find me on Instagram at striation, spelled STRIATIAN, or YouTube. I've got YouTube channels Andrew Manessian. On Twitter, Andrew Manessian, and TikTok, Andrew Manessian as well. Just drop me a DM and we can go over some coffee-related topics and maybe push you in the right direction.
How about you, Mick?
Yeah, on Instagram and Facebook at MickToke, MickTaouk, and YouTube, same thing, MickTaouk. Or you can just shoot me an email, mick@performanceu.com.au.
All right, awesome. So we'll be sure to link both your IGs and contacts in the description. So for anybody watching, just click below and you'll see Mick and Andrew's contact details. Be sure to give them both a follow for more high value fitness content and unique viewpoints. And subscribe to the channel to get the next episode. I think for the next episode, we're probably gonna talk about testosterone. There's some juicy topics coming up in that space. James Cameron, director of Terminator, Titanic, Avatar, he said something pretty disappointing in regards to testosterone. What did he say, Andrew?
Testosterone is
forget the thing. Yeah, so it's sort of like poison. It's bad for you.
He called it a toxin, right? And that's something that we definitely strongly disagree with, and I'm sure most of our audience probably does too. So,
that's just asinine, fucking.
Yeah. We gotta break that down on the next episode. So subscribe to the channel to get the next episode. Thanks for tuning in everyone. Until next time, go crush it, keep performing, and Mick and Andrew, final words.
It was very, very good discussion on all of this. It was good to get some different viewpoints on everything. Marcus, you mentioned a few things that got me thinking about things slightly differently as well. But it's always good to, butt heads, collaborate your thoughts, hear opposing viewpoints, because you're not always going to be right about anything. And I know I've got a pretty different viewpoint with coffee.
And I think I might go down your route, Andrew, on the caffeine. I think I might do a bit of a detox, might do the 3 months, no caffeine again, just to build some brain power, build some resilience in me, and enjoy it just for the just for the when I actually need it and get that buzz that I used to get, because I haven't got that buzz in a very long time. So I'm after wean off a little bit. So thanks for your insight. Appreciate it.
No worries. Cheers.
All right, bye everyone.
See you guys.